I don't know that this particular trial, this criminal trial of an individual whose colleagues, whose investors, customers, and others are testifying in some pretty shocking language about crimes committed and being pretty specific about the things that they're saying. I don't know that this particular moment is actually having much of an impact on the regulatory environment. And that's, of course, because we have to look at what's happening in Washington. We have a House that currently does not have a speaker. We have an unprecedented in American history situation where an acting speaker was actually removed from that role and is now potentially running again. So things are quite chaotic in Washington. And I think that this trial is but a moment. It's a criminal trial again. And the reality is that apart from the customer investors who've testified, we're not hearing a ton from the victims here. And that's the testimony, I think, that really is going to have an influence and an impact on what happens in the regulatory space.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about the environment here in Washington in just a few moments, Sheila. But when we think about this trial, and obviously it is one individual that is on trial because of the collapse of one specific entity, but still, doesn't it air potentially not necessarily dirty laundry, but the relitigating of all of these allegations now actually formally in a court raised questions around practices of the crypto industry as a whole. The idea that a lot of this is still not even understood by the jury, which is hearing this, as we learned in jury selection. There was a lot of differences in the familiarity with crypto. I mean, what does this unearth more broadly?
Yeah, I think, again, just as you noted, Kaylee, it's an individual here who's on trial. It's an individual's actions and that of a small group of people, many whom have already pled guilty to their crimes. It's not an indictment or practices that are widespread across the industry. And I do think that most people understand that distinction. This is what I call a case of kind of old-timey fraud. This goes back. The legacy here is not so much innovative tech. The legacy here is Bernie Madoff. It's Ken Lay. It's things like this. And I think just as we saw Elizabeth Holmes and the trial that involved Theranos, that wasn't putting diagnostic testing on trial. That was putting Elizabeth Holmes on trial. And to some extent, the small group at Theranos that was part of that particular activity with her, I think the same thing's happening here. So to be frank, I don't know that a lot of people outside of the media, frankly, are painting this as the indictment of the industry that some people would like it to be. And instead, I think most people are focused on the criminal activities that happened here, which, again, really have nothing to do with the technology and are just about the misallocation and misuse of funds, which is a tale as old as fraud. That's been done, unfortunately, for a very long time and multiple times over.